I learned so much. Negotiation is not my strongest area, so each time I learn a ton. And you all are really fortunate that they've volunteered their time to come in and work with you, and it's going to be a really fun day. I have to leave a little early. I have to fly out, so I'm going to slip out, and I'll let you two wrap it up. But again, we're really fortunate. Are you an attorney as well by training? Okay, good. So this is great. So you're going to get two different perspectives because Lauren is an attorney by training, and so you'll get different perspectives on negotiation. And anyway, I don't want to go on too long because I want you to have as much time with them as you possibly can. So please welcome Lauren and Brent.
Thank you for your enthusiasm. Yeah, so just so you know a little bit more about us, and we'd like to hear a little bit from you all too, so we kind of know how to direct our conversation, because if you have particular things going on, then we can kind of lean more in that direction. If you have particular challenges, we can kind of head there. But as Catherine said, my name's Lauren Davis. I'm an attorney by training, but also have a social work background. So it's very, like law sometimes is seen as very technical from a word standpoint. But I kind of come from more of a like, how do I feel about this perspective? He will verify that for you. And so it's kind of interesting because sometimes people, I think, want to go black and white, and it's just not, that's not where I'm wired. But I have experience in a mid-sized firm here in Roanoke with about 50 attorneys and 100 staff people, so like a pretty decent sized organization, and sort of negotiating a position and responsibilities within that setting. Then I have experience with the federal government, which you have like zero negotiating power in. I mean, you just go and you are ranked wherever you're ranked for the, range that you get, and that's it. And it's all just very stepwise. Bonuses aren't a thing. It's just like, here's the formula and you just go with that. And then now I'm in a smaller firm, so there are 4 attorneys and about 4 or 5 staff members. And so we have lots of fluidity and lots of flexibility. And so that actually has been one of the better places to kind of flex my negotiation muscle, so to speak, because you know that that the system will support that. So kind of as we talk through these things, you might hear us talk about the different levels and different concerns that you're kind of layering on top of each other. And that will include like what's going on at the organization level, who are the people that you're directly dealing with, what are your propensities, like what are your strengths in conversation, and you have to be aware of kind of all those things at the same time if you want to be as effective as you can be. This is my husband, Brandon Craighead, and I will let him do his own introduction, except I just want you to know why I wanted him to come here, because obviously I have a female perspective. I think that's valuable. But over time, as I've heard about his experience at AEP, so our power company, that's where he's been for 10 plus years, there's been a lot that he said that I've learned from, and not only about like applying for jobs, which hopefully he'll get a chance to talk about in the interview process, crafting really good resumes and cover letters that kind of set you up well for negotiations, even though maybe at that point you're not thinking about that, but you can kind of do some things around that will give you a leg up. But also just how he really doesn't worry about failing. And so it's okay that you apply for something that's kind of beyond your reach, or that you're certain that you won't get. And so hopefully he'll have a chance to talk about that, including the fact that because he really is in a very technical field, it's electricity and electrical engineering type stuff, he sometimes has a very much more black and white view of things. So like I can spend a long time explaining something and he just like cuts right through it to like, okay, this is the essence of the issue. So other than that, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Well, that's tough to follow. Brandon Craighead, like she said, I've my professional experience for the past 11, 12 years since I got out of school has all been with American Electric Power here in Roanoke. All of it was in the field. I used to wear steel-toe boots and a hard hat every day to work, and was in construction. Pretty rough crowd, pretty male-dominated. Recently in January, I transitioned into an office job. I'm over engineering group now, and I guess I didn't really know the topic of the day, negotiation, but I think I have a little bit I can add to it. But I've got a really big business perspective on things because AEP is a huge company. We operate in 13 states, got 20,000 plus employees over that territory, and it's just bound down by a bunch of policies, procedures, HR policies. Sometimes your negotiation skills, you don't even get to use them because you don't have a say in the matter. Everything has to be done fairly for everyone. So I can bring that perspective, and hopefully I can add a little bit to the conversation.
Yeah.
I'll leave anything in.
I mean, I think you're understating things, but
Okay.
so maybe we'll start here, and if you could let us know your name and kind of if there's a particular situation that you're dealing with, let us know that. But also if there are just general trends that you see in yourself, like, oh, I really suck at this, or I'm really awesome here, just so we kind of know how to direct things.
Okay, so I'm April. Nice to meet you both. And something that I'm really not good with is negotiating things to do with money, like the price of a car. I recently bought a car, and that was like a lot of stress. And like I'm curious about how you would go about that, also with houses and like rent payments. So.
Okay.
My name is Paris, and I'm a dancer. I guess my largest negotiations that I probably will be doing are like grants and budgeting, applying for fellowships. I don't know negotiation-wise, because if you submit a grant proposal, then you have a set number that you're submitting already, so. But I guess I could just work with that.
And I mean, we can talk more about this, but I think one thing that is interesting about negotiations is how ever present they are in our lives across different situations. But most of the time when we talk about it in an academic setting or in a formal way, it feels like, okay, do I want this much money or this much money, and how do I ask for it, how do I get there? And it starts to feel like there's this way it's supposed to look. So maybe one thing that we can talk about is how much it comes into play everywhere. I mean, I'm sitting beside someone who I have to negotiate with all the time. I mean, including on the way over here, like, hey, that thing that I had that was gonna be causing me to be late from work tonight, that's actually canceled, but will you still go get our children? I'm like, does that work? So we, and that's a negotiation, and there are ways that can go that are better or worse, and that sets you up for later conversations and other negotiations in a better or worse way. So we'll kind of get there, but I think I understand where you're coming from, that it doesn't feel like they're there for you, but I bet kind of as we talk you might think of some other situations that you can use it in.
Am I gonna go next?
Yeah, sure.
My name is Sydney, and I'm only a junior, so I still have another year in school, but in my job, there's kind of negotiation that I'm working through right now, and I'm up for a position for promotion from a sales associate to a sales lead. But there's some difficulty with scheduling and whether or not that would make me the best fit. So I guess like my way is like, how much am I willing to give for the promotion, and like what's reasonable for me to ask off, if that makes any sense. So.
Me? Hi, I'm Shallon. I'm also a junior on campus, so I still will be here next year. So in terms of like big goals, I want to be a teacher, and I actually plan on spending an extra semester here after I graduate to student teach. So I want to live on campus, but I technically won't be a student in either the undergrad program or the grad program. So I kind of want to negotiate to get living, like housing here on campus, even though I'm technically not going to be a student. And I know that there's ways to do that, either working with our HRO, our Housing and Resident Life, or our student activities to get like a suite apartment here on campus. So kind of negotiating how to go about that, even though I won't be a student here on campus technically, in like a situated situation. And then, I mean, that's futuristic. That's next, not this fall, but next fall, but still. Something I'm considering.
4 RAs sit in this room.
I don't know anything about that housing though.
But I
think like there is a way to go into
There must be.
like I don't have the answer, but I think there is.
But you're gonna find
You're
it.
feeling lots of hope. Goma's feeling lots of hope.
Good, that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Well, hello, my name's Priya. Nice to see you again. I think I'm like running into 2 negotiations like coming up as soon as I go back home for summer. I've been noticing that like my relationship with my mother has been changing, in that like now that I am like formally I have like a higher title than her. Like if I got a position at her organization, she works with Blue Cross, and her boss is actually like actively asking, and she's like, if I got a position with her, it would like, she would notice that it would like, I would get paid more than her, and now that she's like sort of come to that full realization of like what this means, it's sort of like gotten this to us this weird place in our relationship where we're just sort of like hesitant. And then the other negotiation I'm coming up on is like more minor and like day to day. I got an internship with the Rotorua Food Bank, and rather than it just being a 1-person position, they split the internship and made it 2 people, so we'd have to be working together on the same projects, and just like the minor things going into that I'm a little worried about because it's someone I don't know, obviously, and it's also just someone who like I'm not sure like it has a potential to go badly, and this is probably just me like overreacting and being like really nervous, but like what if like we just can't work together and our project sinks because of it, and it's just I get nervous a lot, so
My name is Cheyenne. I'm a senior, so I'm in the middle of applying for jobs, and I think my biggest issue right now is trying to like negotiate an entry-level salary, because I want to make sure I can like live, survive.
yeah.
But also like I do know that I'm like coming in at like the bottom, tier in the career field coming right out of college. So I think that's my biggest struggle right now.
Sorry, that gives us the, sorry, go ahead.
I'm Goma, and I'm a senior. After Hollins, I'm joining graduate program, and so my first part of negotiation is done because I'm from Nepal. So my parents, they wanted me to stay here because they're comfortable with the idea of me living in US because I have been living here for 4 years. But I'm going Europe for my master's program, so I had to convince them that that's still a good program and it's still good for me and all that. So now they're convinced. But so my other part of negotiation would be, so every time I go home, when I'm here, I can make my own decision. I can do whatever I want. So there is no any kind of barrier. Because most of the time they don't really know what I'm doing. But even they do, then I always tell them after I'm already gone through it and I've done it. So that has been my part of negotiating with them, to tell them after things are done. But when I'm going home, then that's not going to work because I'm going to be living with them. And even if I'm not living with them, then I need to get permission because otherwise they will like, no. So now going back home, there are friends that I want to like go around traveling, but I don't think my parents will be okay with it because I tried it before and they were like, no. And I was mad at them for a few days, but after that I was like, okay, this is how it is.
Yeah, and that's, I'm sure, cultural in some respects. And
yeah, a lot.
God, it's great because there's so many things that we could touch on, and I'm just like, my mind has been like, where should we start? So let's start with something that's absolutely universal, which is that you're going to have a relationship in a work setting where you don't like the person that you're working with. That will happen. Every last dime I have, I will put on that. So, do you have experience with that, Brandon?
No. I don't like them because of a personality issue, or I don't like them because they're not pulling their weight, or...
You take it however, just take it however you like.
I'm incredibly easy to get along with, I think. The goal is real easy in my job, keep the lights on, so we all work towards that. I guess it doesn't matter your position at the power company, we're the power company. Gotta keep the lights on, but most of the people I clash with are people that I don't feel that pull their weight. I feel like there's certain unwritten rules at work, and we're all there to do one thing, work together, and that gets to be a problem, so how it ties to negotiation or just
There's, I mean, how you deal with it is obviously related to it.
really, it just, we're big on teamwork, so we're always working with each other. So when someone's not pulling their weight, the group has to pick up for it. And that's really tough because it creates a lot of animosity in the group. Everybody's mad, everybody can point the finger at someone. Sometimes you're a lazy person, we'll refer to them as that. Starts to get some allies and it starts to multiply and you get more lazy people. So you kind of got to head that type of thing off. How to do it, I really don't know. It's case by case, but really, you just jump in there and you start working and doing their stuff too. And I hate to take that approach, but it's really worked out because over time, that person either gets found out and they get called out on it, or they decide they're going to do something else and they leave on their own. That's happened several times. So it's really tough to fire someone from AAP. So when you get someone like that, it's they could be around for a while. So it's really disheartening to want to jump in and do that person's work for them because it could go for years. Been in that position, but I like to think, looking back on my past, that actually jumping in and doing that has helped me succeed because it helped me develop. I'm not only doing my job, I'm now doing someone else's job. That's twice the experience. They may have done something that I wasn't familiar with, so now I get more exposure. I'm going to get more face time with my supervision because I've got twice the responsibility, basically. So there's good to come out of it, and for you personally, it sucks at the moment, but you can just jump in there and then hopefully you can be a good example, and they may not know what they're doing. And then all of a sudden you jump in there and take off and they realize, hey, that's all I needed to know is what to do, and now they start picking up the slack and working with you, and it solves itself. So, you?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we have in common is that we both tend to be relatively easy to get along with, at least outwardly. So whatever frustrations that we have inwardly, we can kind of set that aside to deal with whomever else. And I think the framing of it is such a huge issue because, like Brandon was saying, if you have, and you may have experienced this in classes too, like if you have one person who's sort of a Debbie Downer, it just sort of shifts the culture and attitude of the whole class. Like over time, it really is contagious or can be contagious. But the same way, it works the same way on the other end. Like when you have someone who's like super happy and optimistic, and even if you're not really that optimistic at the moment, that rubs off too over time. And so I think that if you frame it as an opportunity, that's one way to help. And I can tell you with Brandon, and of course, like he's come home over the years, and we've had conversations specifically about these people who, are creating conflict, if not directly for him, for the team. And what he's saying is absolutely true about what it meant for his long-term positioning in the company. Because when he would apply for positions and would be going to interview, it's like here he is saying that he's not only done this one official title that he's had, but he's done all these other things too, and that included like committee work, it included experience on actual different tasks that weren't necessarily part of what he was supposed to be doing. It included not just a different task, but management of that task. So like he said, he now manages some people, but that's a technical role that he was informally doing for 2 or 3 years before now. And so now he's got this sort of leg up in that position because he's kind of already been doing that. And I personally, of course I haven't been there, but kind of just hearing from him, I personally think that had a lot to do with why he got the position he has. Now, even though that position was a highly competitive position with other people who had much more substantive experience. So I would say really use that as an opportunity. And I would add from a personal perspective that there are really, I think, the people that I've run into that have been difficult to get along with, there are a couple categories of them. There are really people who are just doing, and this is what Brandon knows I've struggled with the most, people who are just doing the least they can do to get by. And that just like, it drives me crazy because, you know, even if I get along with them on a personality level, it's something about work ethic. And I have had I had to work very hard to resist the urge to drop my work performance down because of that. Because when you know that someone is not pulling their weight and they're getting by with it, especially in a big organization, then it's easy to think, well, I want to do the same thing. But again, I think the larger picture is that you are not served by that. Like in the end, you will be benefited by taking the high road.
One of the big part of this class is it's an integration of all the theories and things that they've been learning throughout their years of Patent Leadership Institute. And I was thinking of two things, because you're talking about conflict. They've had a lot of training in conflict, and both of you were talking about being easy to get along with and taking perspective and understanding how to deal with that, and that's been a big part of your success in your career. So I just want to reiterate that you all have a lot of those conflict skills that make you also easy to get along with, meaning not that you're just taking it, but that you're also going to be able to have a meaningful conversation across it and keep that tension from building. The other question I have, I mean, that was a comment, and I also have a question. Another model they've learned is the 5 dysfunctions of a team model.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Brandon, when you were talking, it really sounded, you know, there's that, you know, there's the absence of trust, absence of, lack of conflict, and then lack of commitment, and then that next level is the one of accountability, which is, that's the part, in my experience with leaders, they have the most, everybody has the most, a lot of people have the most trouble with that accountability part. And so you were talking about how to work around it, which I think is extremely important. What about holding a peer accountable? Do you have any experience with conversations like that? Just again to tie it into the model that they've learned.
I'm actually familiar with your 5 dysfunctions. It was actually recommended to me by someone really close. I looked into that. But, accountability, that's a tough one because AP's so big, it has so many people. Sometimes it's like a big university campus. You can get lost and easily overlooked, and you can just kind of skate by. There's nothing wrong with that sometimes. The guy that wants to show up and just do what he's supposed to, like, we need people like that. You want to get the people that show up and do the extra mile and have their, get recognition for it. We got a bunch of people like that too. But accountability, you really have to own your own accountability, I think. And what I mean by that is, if you're in that situation where someone's not pulling their weight and something doesn't go right and you were the one stepping in for them, you now get to take the blame for that. And the best way to do that is not turn around and point your finger at the other guy and blame it on him. It's probably pretty obvious he's not doing anything. And you might get looked at and like, really? You were doing this and you had to trust in him to think he was going to do it? He hasn't been doing it all along. Why would he step up and start doing it now? So it almost makes you look bad that you're trying to blame the person who wasn't doing their job in the first place. So don't ever make excuses. That's kind of a stance I've taken. If you screw up, just own your mistake. That's worked well for me. It's been incredibly embarrassing at sometimes, and I've knocked thousands of people out of power by accident by what I do. What I used to put my fingers in and stuff, and had to explain what happened. And it was because I, basically grabbed the wrong light switch. Like, what kind of an idiot does that? But stuff like that happens, and the best thing you can do is just own it and fess up to it, and that speaks more to your character, and I think that goes a long way. So just be accountable for your own mistakes.
I love that. That goes back to when we were a book we read this semester called The Power of Moments, and they were talking about courage, and people know, and acting with integrity, and people often know what to do, but they don't know how to do it. And I think what you're talking about is the how to do it. Just own what you did, say it, and what a great example, because that's a big deal, right? You've knocked thousands of people out of power, but we've all, any one of us who've had a long enough career can talk about some big mistake that's affected other people in a way that's not something that we're comfortable with. So that's a great example.
I have literally made $1 million mistakes, so but you have to be able to make up for it too.
That's right.
Yeah, I would think of it this way, and I think that I've learned so much about perspective and also human nature by raising a child. And when one of them, we have two, and when one of them comes and it takes more than like a second to explain why it's not their fault, then it's their fault, and they should have just owned up to it from the start. And I think the same thing is true with work. Like if you, or other relationships, if it takes you very long to explain to someone why it's not your fault, that's probably an instance where you should just like take accountability for it. Because and we know how that feels from the other side, right? When someone comes to us and they're like over explaining why it's not their fault, and it's taking like a long convoluted path to get there. And what are we thinking in our heads? Like, what an excuse. This is such an elaborate excuse. Like, they should have just owned it. And so I think maybe, like, if you want a rule of thumb, like, that's the rule of thumb. How long is it going to take to explain to someone that it wasn't your fault? But to the other question, or to your question, Catherine, about accountability with colleagues, I think you have to follow the money or follow whatever the equivalent value of that is in the organization. So, like with my colleagues, if someone, like say with partners in my law firm, if someone is not at the end of the day adding value, which you can define that in different ways, but for most businesses, at the end of the day, you're going to be talking about dollars and cents. And if they're not adding value, that's something that you can objectively show. And so whatever that thing is, like whatever the metric is in your organization or the value in a relationship that you're looking at, like find that, like put your finger on that, and then find the metrics for it. And there's more out there than you think in terms of being able to objectively measure that. And then when you can, and I tend to be like okay with conflict. It's not something that I seek out, but I deal with it every day. Like every small conversation I have with an attorney who's on the other side of a case is basically a little conflict. I mean, that's just what it is, and sometimes I may forget to turn that off because it just feels so natural. Like I've just gotten used to it. And so to me, once I'm armed with knowing the bottom line, like what the value is that's driving the organization and the relationship, and once I have the metrics I need to be able to compare performance, I don't really mind to have a conversation about it. Not that it's easy, but I think when you have what you need to do it, it feels much more comfortable than it would otherwise. Now I think the mistake is where you just like have this intuition or this feeling that someone's not doing what they should do, and you just want to go say that to them without any real evidence. Again, if you put yourself in their place, what does that feel like when someone does that to you? Like your roommate's like, I just don't feel like you're cleaning up the way you're supposed to or doing that, and you're thinking, what proof do you have of that? Like how many times have you said something like that? Like someone makes an allegation against you, and then you say, why would you say that? Like what's the evidence for that? And that's, as a human thing, I think something that we want. And so this is just a matter of order. So what's happening first? Are you making the allegation, having them react emotionally and ask for the evidence, and then you give the evidence? Or are you flipping that and you're starting with your evidence, and then you're presenting the problem, and then you're continuing the conversation from there? So I think what I see in terms of mistakes a lot of times is when, like, we have staff members sometimes, and, again, not everyone gets along together, and so someone's got some little conflict, and they come and they're like, oh, such and such is doing this thing that I just think she's not being respectful, but doesn't get into any real specifics that help me to understand the situation or to show me that they've actually tried to address it themselves. And I just have much less investment in it at that point because it just sounds like gossip, like office drama, as opposed to, look, this is how this is affecting our office culture. These are the specific things that are happening. I've tried these solutions. Like that to me is a measure of accountability that you want, and that all happens in small steps too, by the way. And it's kind of like the Who Moved My Cheese. I don't know if anybody ever reads that book anymore.
I don't know if y'all seen that.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that there's a mouse in a maze, and he eats this cheese at the center of it, and he goes every morning and he eats a bite, and eats a bite, and eats a bite. And then one morning he goes and it's gone. He's like, who moved my cheese? Well, he ate his cheese. That's what happened. It was like a little bit at a time over that whole time. It didn't happen all of a sudden, but somehow like that's how these conflicts seem to present themselves, is that, oh, everything was okay and then it wasn't. Well, that's not true. I mean, like that's been an issue in our relationship where it's like I have something that has been brewing for a while, but I haven't put my finger on it, and then it's like this huge issue. And then I go to him, and the first thing I say is like, here's this huge issue. Well, that's my missed opportunity for not dealing with it and being tuned in enough to talk about it along the way. And I think with office conflict, that's actually a lot of times what happens, or any organizational conflict, is you're not putting your finger on it soon enough, and then by the time you do, the culture has shifted and you really do have a lack of accountability or a lack of trust or whatever it is. Yeah.
You hit on a good one there. Somebody mentioned they're looking for entry-level positions, and you're going to run into this. You're going to walk into a field, a brand new job, you're not going to know what you're doing. You may have a supervisor who's kind of like me, that's brand new to his job, and he doesn't know what's going on either, and he may not admit it. I've been very transparent with my employees to let them know we're all learning together, but you may not necessarily be aware of that, and that goes with conflict too. You may hit an obstacle because it's naturally going to take you longer to do things in an entry-level position than it does your colleagues. They may, hopefully they're going to treat you good, and they're not going to be very condescending and put you down for it to take long. Everybody's got to learn. But you may have conflicts that come up that are a really big deal to you, but nobody else sees it. And it may tear you up, and it may tear you up for days and weeks, months, and nobody knows it's going on but you. So sometimes you gotta air your dirty laundry and just get it out there. And that goes back to the accountability thing too. It may be of your making, or it may be of somebody else's, and good communication can get you out of that kind of situation. Like she's talking about me. Sometimes she'd hit me with a problem that had been going on for months, and I'm like, wow, this is the first I've heard of this. You know, I can kind of see how you feel that way, but it really would have worked out well if we had talked about this before now. Because she always hit me with those things at the most inopportune times. So it can save you a lot of trouble to get it out there and try to deal with your conflicts, and actually make it known it's a conflict for you. And as an entry-level employee, you may not feel that you're worth the time to do that, but whoever hires you is going to be paying you, and they made the decision to bring you on, so they got to spend some time with you. So you are worth it, so you got to voice your opinion, be heard.
On the entry level thing, can you talk a little bit about how you've developed your resume and cover letters over time?
Okay, that's jumping topics.
Yeah.
We
only have but so much time.
Yeah. I don't know where to start with that one. I'll just go back to AEP is a great big company. We have a lot of opportunities coming up. Right now we're investing $3.2 billion a year, and that's relatively new in the past 5 years. It's created a lot of opportunities both in-house and out-of-house. A lot of job postings on our internal job board. And I'm in kind of a very specific technical field, so once you get about 5 years of experience under your belt, you're incredibly valuable. I was trying to leverage that, and I put in for all kinds of jobs. Some of them I didn't even want. And it was looked poorly upon at first, but then I realized why I was doing it. I guess my management did. I was actually just getting some experience getting job interviews, and I think that really helped me over the years. So one thing, while you're putting in for jobs, don't read into it for a whole lot and try to find the one that fits you. Put in for a lot and try to get a few interviews under your belt before you go try for that one that you really do want. That might help you out. You're obviously, if you're looking for a job, you're unemployed, so you have time. You have no excuse to not do it. But with resumes, I think it all should be on one page, and I think you should always include a cover letter, regardless of what the job is. I found out that my colleagues, they don't care what length your resume is. They actually want more technical details since we're in a technical field. Found out a couple guys don't even read cover letters. They don't think they're relevant. I think it's important because you have that one more page. Again, don't make an epic novel out of your cover letter, but hit the high points and tell them a little bit about you. Like your resume has your technical qualifications, your degrees. They're going to be able to kind of figure out how old you are by the time you figure, when you're getting out of college. They know they have a good idea of who you are by the time you walk in the door by your resume. And if they don't, you didn't do your job well enough. So you need to kind of paint that picture for them. And your cover letter is how you kind of add a little bit more to that. If you're moving locations, you're going to leave Roanoke and you're going to go across the country. If I'm interviewing somebody, that's a really relevant detail. I want to know why they're coming all the way across the country, because I wouldn't do that. And usually they have a really good reason. Family, friends, they just want to see the West Coast. I don't know. But you can throw little things in there like that. Your resume is a living, breathing document, and even once you get employed, you want to keep that thing up to date, because you never know when a good opportunity will come up that you want to put in for. And
I would underscore that. He's so good about that, and I'm so terrible.
At AEP, we have a lot of jobs come up, and you can read the qualifications, and you can look at them, and you can do this while you're looking at the classified ads or Craigslist or wherever you're doing your job listing. Like, man, that was a really good description, and I can do that. Let me throw that in my resume, because you'll get good ideas. I've been able to go through a lot of them over the years, and I've stole some other people's ideas. So spend some time on it. It's not a one and done opportunity where you sit down and that's it and that's my resume. I work with guys like that 30 years later, they got the original resume that they applied for that position with, and they want to move into something else, and they're like, how do I update this? Like, well, first of all, the technology has changed. Like, you have slide rule on here. Now, y'all might not know what slide rule is, but and then in a cover letter, in order to voice your opinion and let them know a little bit about you, do a little research on the company you're going to work for. AEP is really big. We have a pretty good website. We have good customer outreach. There's all kinds of resources. There's a big online presence. It doesn't take long to research us and figure out what makes us tick. And what I mean by that is like a company culture. That's a real big one now. If you're going to work for a big company, figure out what their culture is. And these buzzwords you can throw in that cover letter that are really impressive, that make people stand out. We have our 5 transmission pillars. I'm in the transmission department, and it's our buzzwords are mutual care, informed, collaborative, that's a big one, engaged, and solutions oriented. So every cover letter I write within AEP, I put those words in there, and I try to stress them, because it may not matter to some people, but then some of our management, they really love that, and they're like, wow, he's really collaborative, let's give him an opportunity. So find those buzzwords, and then just general industry buzzwords. Teamwork's a big one. If you've done a lot of project work in your school here, be sure to talk about that in an interview. Everybody's a self-starter. Everybody's a motivator. But to be able to give an example of how you were a good team player and how you can join together with other people and make something happen, that's really relevant. So all 3 of them really have to work together. You got to have a good resume to make them interested, a cover letter to kind of give them an idea of what you're going, and a really good strategy for an interview. So make all that stuff tie together. You don't have to recite them your resume in an interview. You don't have to recite them your cover letter, but you do want to hit the high points. And there's another little side note. If you're applying for a job and it's got a place for your resume and cover letter, go in and create one file. Put your cover letter on one page and your resume on the other one, and put it in both spots. Because I found out at AP, you guys that don't read cover letters, I uploaded my cover letter and they never downloaded. And I spent a lot of time on that. So it kind of hurt my feelings. So I put the same document in both places, and they've got to throw it away if they want to when they print it.
And bring it to your interview.
Oh yeah, bring you some copies to your interview too.
Including the cover letter.
Make sure everybody's got a copy. But
Priya, your situation that you're anticipating and having some anticipatory anxiety about, that's a perfect example of something you could highlight later. Whether it turns out to be the challenge you think it will be, or it's much easier, but it's still a great example of collaboration and teamwork, and you can use that. And just to underscore what Brandon is saying about the cover letter, because I've spent a lot of time on his cover letters too. And he sent me one of the first ones, and it had all these different colors. It was color coded. There were certain words here and there that were different colors. I was like, what is this? And sure enough, it was if you had one page that had the pillars and the culture, that was important to them, and then he just like found ways to integrate it into his sentences in the cover letter. So it wasn't like, oh yeah, these 5 things, which by the way are your 5 pillars, happen to be important to me too. It was like very naturally integrated, so it was very subtle. You know, because of course when he turned the cover letter in, he made it all the same color font. But that's a way that you kind of start to integrate yourself with their culture, and it starts early. And so then, to tie us back into our negotiation talks, you've already become like them. And it is, again, a matter of human nature that we like people like us. And this is a way that you seem like them without ever having to say anything directly to them like that. Like it's just going to be understood and implied from their first interactions with you. So what I would say about that, kind of broadening that more generally to any negotiation, is that don't underestimate every contact that you have with someone as an opportunity to set up a good negotiation. And I'll just use an example. We have, obviously Coleman is a very big healthcare provider in this area. I do medical malpractice work, and so there are many, many cases that we handle in our office against Coleman. And so the attorneys that generally represent Coleman and the attorneys who work in Coleman are people who are familiar to us. They're people we see in social settings, out and about, who we deal with multiple times on cases. And if I were to just sort of like go into every interaction with them as you are my adversary every time, I could promise you that would not work well. And one of the most difficult conversations that I have had in my recent past goes back like years and years. It was with another attorney that I had well, I'm going to call it a misunderstanding. It felt like more than that to me. It felt like a personal attack. But ever since then, I just had this significant issue. Anytime we had to do anything together, like we went from 0 to 100 on the anger scale in like no time. And that persisted for years and years. And it was like, even to the point where when I would see the number on the phone, I would just have that visceral reaction to it. And about a year ago, we had a case when we were on the opposite side of each other, and we were going to try to settle it. And they had expressed some interest in doing that. And rather than using a mediator, so like a third party who is a neutral to the conversation and kind of goes back and forth, they wanted to just do it with the attorneys, like with me and her, and we were going to go back and forth. And I knew that it was going to not serve my client well for me to be going back and forth with this person because of this history that I've just described to you. And so my first reaction was actually to avoid it and to say, no, the way we have to do this is through a mediator, period. That was my first reaction. And then I thought about it for a second. I said, why do they want us to do it directly? Like, to them, for some reason, there's some benefit to this. This is their preference. They've expressed this preference. And who am I, for no good reason, or for a reason that I could overcome, to say, no, I'm going to disregard your preference? And so the more I thought about it, and I mean, when I say I thought about it, it was like a matter of weeks deliberating over this. I realized what I needed to do was confront her and just have a direct conversation about why I thought it wasn't a good idea for us to negotiate directly. The result of that was like a 45-minute heart-to-heart, a request that, we go hang out, have wine together, just have a chance to put the whole thing behind us. And we settled that case. And we were both happy with the settlement. Believe it or not, that does not always happen. But that was one of the most difficult conversations. And I mean, I don't know how y'all are about nerves, but when I'm like really excited about something or really nervous about something, my heart doesn't stop. Nothing stays in my stomach. It's just like, it's sickening feeling. And that's the feeling that I had about that conversation, because I've been holding on to those feelings about it for so long. And I had a really strong narrative about how the whole thing had gone and how grieved I was personally. So to be able to put that behind me was not an easy task. And he had to hear about it way more, I'm sure, than he wanted to. But it continues to pay dividends, because now we've had any number of cases since then. And when the phone rings and I see the number, I think nothing of it. When the email comes through from that address, I have no reaction. And so there are benefits both directly in that one moment, but now spread out across these different interactions. And by the way, just physically for me, it gets better. So don't underestimate the power of that confrontation. And I know that kind of has a negative connotation, but you know, there are times when there really will be value, and the short-term pain that you have from that will give you long-term gain.
I have a question. Yes, ma'am. Kind of going back to the interviewing skills and everything like that. I want to become a teacher, so a big part of that is I feel like I have these skills and these attitudes towards teaching that I'm very involved in that I feel like are a core part of my pedagogy. And in the interview process, not only do I feel as though they're interviewing me for that position, but I want to interview them because I want to make sure that I'm going into a space where I can teach the way I feel is best, while adhering to the structures that they have in place. So what like strategies do you have for also interviewing them?
Yeah.
Right.
When they ask the question, do you have any questions for us? You take advantage of that, and you use a really great word there. I wish I knew what it was. But when you think about that, I'm not good with words. When you think about that, figure out, all right, here's my expectations. I've got my list. And how do you work that back into the conversation? You're going to have to do some of that on the fly. You can sit down and you can have one of those conversations in your head every time you get in a car and you drive somewhere, and they may never happen. I don't know if anybody else does that, you know, conversations with people that never happen, especially when you're mad with somebody. Yeah, it never plays out the way you think it does. So anyway, you're sitting there thinking about interviews, the same thing's going to happen, but at least you've done some prep work and you can use something. And figure out what you want from them, because it's an interview both ways. You know, I've had that happen, been in an interview and like, whoa, what you just said does not appeal to me at all. And, you know, I've told them, so.
I think start from this thought, which is that you are going to feel more comfortable going into the interview, asking the direct questions that you want to ask if you know that you have other things going on as possibilities. So if you're hanging your hat on that one interview, at least if it's me, I'm going to feel much less comfortable with being as direct as I might think I need to be and asking questions that might turn them off or clearly make it obvious that you're not a good fit. But if you have your net cast pretty broadly, then you're just doing what you need to do. You're just making sure it's the right fit and that you're making a good decision. So that's the thing you can do before you ever get there. When you actually get to the interview, and having sat through a number of interviews now on both ends of things, it is amazing how much people like to talk about themselves. And you just like open your eyes a little bit when you're kind of in a social environment or a work environment. They will. If you just let them, they will. And so I've been in interviews where with like other people who are interviewing with me, and the interviewee comes in and like 2 minutes into it, there's some question the interviewee asks of the interviewers. And I'll sit and watch my co-interviewer talk for like 5, 6, 7 minutes straight. And they'll just like give away the barn. Like you're getting all sorts of good information. And it really is amazing how much people are willing to say. And so when Brandon says, kind of don't expect that you can have it all planned out exactly, you kind of have to be on the fly. I strongly, strongly agree with that. It's kind of like, I would make the analogy to when you're having a conversation with your best friend and you're really not waiting to talk, like you're really actually listening to them, and they say something and you're like doing the journalist thing. When? Why? Where? How? Like you just are so engaged and interested in what they're saying that you just keep following up, and then you get all this great information that if you weren't really listening and you're just waiting to ask the question that's next on your list, that you wouldn't get to ask. And you wouldn't hear the information that they're giving you. That's the mindset that I have, is like every setting like that is an opportunity for you to just get information. And I think people generally want to give you information. And so, yeah, just listen to what they're saying, and probably like say, I don't know what your philosophy is, but let's say there's one buzzword that really represents that philosophy, and then there's the opposite of that doesn't. and you hear the thing that doesn't, well, there you go, like, that's information, you can follow up there. So what do you mean by this, or how does this, integrate into your teaching philosophy? And so I think it really is a matter of listening carefully and following up there.
Is it okay to like paint scenarios? Like for example, like if I was in a situation where it's like I was once working in a school and I was at a child study meeting and I noticed that the teacher was using inappropriate language but no one challenged her on it. How would you handle that situation here in this district? Is that like a good thing to like say, to like question, to make sure that like negative experience I've had before, to see how they would tackle that same experience?
The way that you said that hit me as, is this person going to complain about us? Like, that's the way it first hit me when you said it. So I think it's just a framing thing. I think it's fine to ask the question. I'm just thinking about a way, I think that you can say it in a more general way. So, not like, I was in this place.
Oh, I would never like say the name of the place, but like I've had experiences before in certain school districts working in a child study situation where I felt that the teacher's way of communicating about the child was very negative. As an administration, how would you handle that?
It's kind of, I'm worried because some things you're saying are subjective. Like, you perceived it as inappropriate or you perceived it as negative. And anyone in their right mind is going to say, oh yeah, we address that all the time. It's kind of like when I would go into law interviews and law firms and be like, do you have work-life balance? I'm like, oh yeah, we love work-life balance. Like, yeah, I mean, you can't give a different answer, I don't think. Like, could you imagine them saying, we let teachers who use inappropriate behavior get away with it?
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering like how they would go about like what's the like strategic like way of.
And maybe you could just ask that.
Yeah.
How do you handle it when the conversation, you believe the conversation's turned negative? How do you just, maybe not,
basing it
maybe
from
not,
their
maybe
perspective.
not. Because I agree with Lauren that that initial reaction is, and she's done a lot of interviews, that's a good, sort of generalizing. But asking a question that will give you specific information.
And also, if they're, again, going back to objective information, do you have a policy about? Because then, especially if it's something that they've sort of ingrained as a policy, then it's not just them saying it, but then you can, number one, verify it, because if it's something that's that important to you, you might very well want to verify it. But two, you can know that it's important enough to them that they've developed a policy on it. And any more school systems have a policy on everything that's important to them or required by law. But, other things that are important to them they mentioned. Do you have other thoughts about that?
You gotta be careful with that because, talking about the obvious answers, I have 3 positions right now that are open, and it's really hard to find a candidate for that job. And I've got to fill 3 of them. So if somebody asks me a question that I think is going to be off-putting to them, it's not like I'm going to lie to them, but I'm probably going to try to sugarcoat it as best I can. So if I really want you to come work for me because you're a stellar candidate, I'm probably not going to say, well, yeah, here's all the negative things that happened in that scenario you just gave, and try to turn you off to it. So they may want you just as much as you want to come work for them. So keep that in mind too.
Thank you.
And I think that's just more generally important as you talk about like grants or grad school applications on all of that, is like, what's the supply and demand there? And sometimes it can be hard to get that information, but probably not as hard as it used to be. So if you have some sense of the popularity of a position or a grant, and you can know that going in, it gives you a good way to kind of balance your expectations, and kind of funnel the information that you're giving. Because like Brandon said, if he's interviewing people and he needs way more people than he can actually get, you have an advantage there. And then in sort of the calculus of how much you push, how specifically you ask, you can do that more. A good way, and you have this happen at AP sometimes, is if you see a job get reposted. So like they post it and it's open for 2 months and they repost it and then do the same thing over and over. It's like, okay, they've had this job open for 6, 8, 10 months. Why is that? Because they can't find a candidate. Like, I think that's kind of a safe thought as to why it's there. Well, it's probably going to be, that's good information that's helpful to you if you want to push them and ask not only the more uncomfortable questions, but also when it comes to negotiating benefits and compensation packages. One thing I think that generally comes up that might be worth mentioning is, what do you do, like we talked about entry level negotiations, what can you ask for? This is my 2 cents, I'll let Brandon say what he thinks, but most entry level positions don't give you a lot of flexibility on your salary. So that's where, do y'all read the oh gosh, which is the book that has the Trading Things of Unequal Value?
The women don't ask
No, it's the whole book, and it's like 10 things. It's structured as 10 negotiation things. I can't remember the name of the book. Stuart Diamond maybe is the.
Oh, I don't think.
Okay, well, it's just the concept that what's important to you does not have the same importance necessarily to someone else. So it's the idea of trading things of unequal value. So at your point in life, time may be something you're willing to give for more money, or time may be something that you're willing to give for better health insurance, or better retirement benefits, or more pay time off, or whatever. And you have to go into it having some information, and then hopefully gathering more information about what is it that they value, like what's important to them that's less valuable to you, because then you can give more of that up, and it seems like a huge benefit to them, but to you, you don't really feel like you're giving that much. I think, and that actually kind of ties into the thing with Guma's parents is, and we can talk maybe more specifically about that if you want, but clearly it's valuable to you to go out. So if you can find what's more important to them, like if you, for instance, I'm assuming your academic performance is very important to them.
Yeah, but because I have been doing good for so long now, it's just granted that I'll do good.
Yeah.
Well,
Now it's expected.
yeah. So you've screwed yourself. No, but if you can tie these things together, that you achieve those grades and still do the sorts of things that you're asking of them, asking that for permission to do, then maybe that will feel okay to them. Like if you can prove to them that you can still get the grades and do that, or even set it up as like, look, if my grades fall, then I'll pull back on these other activities. Because that's probably, my guess is, I'm sure that you care about your grades too, but my guess is they care about it more than you care about your grades. So that's like a way to look at it. Or maybe there are other things that are more important to them. But I did want to give you a chance to comment on the entry-level negotiation thing.
Yeah, that's very dangerous, because when I got out of school, there were a lot of opportunities available. It's right before the housing crisis hit. I would not want to be in your shoes right now looking for a job. That's just me being honest. Because entry-level positions are very competitive right now. There are not a lot of them out there, so you are probably not the only one putting in for it. And you want to be very careful if you walk in, because there's a really good example of someone who went through a competitive program, got out, and was ready to get their first job as a PA. They went to the interview. Physician assistant. Went to their first interview, no experience. Now, a lot of schooling and a lot of classroom experience, and it all came down to they wanted $2,000 more on their salary. Now, I was thinking about that, having worked for a little bit. What is that $2,000 really worth to me? Because everything that comes along with that is someone sitting there knowing that someone has no experience. We got to bring you in. We got to pay all this money to train you, and now you want an extra $2,000. It almost creates a character flaw for you. It's like, wow, they're asking for this now, and they don't know anything. Once they get some experience under their belt, how demanding are they going to be then? So you almost set like a negative tone, so you got to be very, very careful. Now, if it is kind of a niche field and you're a unique candidate, make sure you understand that context, but also be very, very careful what you ask for, because it may be very off-putting. So.
So, how many of you feel like you fall somewhere on the ends of the spectrum, closer to the ends of the spectrum? Wallflower or pushover on the one hand, and sort of witch